This is a quick mic check, just checking to see how the audio does. Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3. What is up, loyal lads and ladies? My name is Midnight Wolf, and welcome to episode 2 of College Football Among the Ranks show. In today's episode, I'm going to kind of go over the AP poll preseason for college football. And I will also kind of go back over some of the stuff that I covered in the previous stream, mainly because I had some technical difficulties with some of my graphics not popping up whenever they should have. So that was my bad, and I will try to kind of review some of that very briefly, so that way the graphics that I meant to show off get shown off. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get started. So we're going to kind of go over real quick. I have both sets of polls that were posted on ESPN's website. We've got the AFCA coaches poll, which is the one that we covered in the first episode. And so I really don't have to go over it too terribly much. But I guess either last night while I was streaming or sometime this morning, the AP poll came out. And so I wanted to just go ahead and, kind of similar to what we did with the coaches poll, kind of criticize it for a bit, because like we see a lot of similarities between these two polls, and it once again it just irritates me to see like just kind of where in the world they come up with this stuff. But like we did in the previous episode, I'm gonna kind of highlight some of these teams that I just can't help but scratch my head when I see them. I just once again this one is more focused on the AP 25, but I figured I'd go ahead and put the other one up there. But I just, whenever I look at these polls, I just can't help but like just sit there and question things. And I did add LSU on there. I didn't really cover LSU in the previous one, but I did go ahead and add LSU. I don't have their graphics, but I get the funny feeling that LSU's on there just because they're SEC and it's a quality win and or quality loss for other SEC teams. But that being said, let's just kind of hop right into it, and I'm going to kind of approach this very similar to how I approached the first episode, but it'll be for the AP poll. So I'm going to try to show the same graphics that should have popped up in that first episode, but due to the technical difficulties, they did not. So let's just quickly move on to Alabama. So I did kind of go over some of the stuff that, let's see, give me 1 second. I gotta make sure that they actually pop up this time. Let's see, AP poll. I'm going to move you over to the right. And we're going to hide the coaches poll, since this is mainly the AP poll. All right. I think we got this figured out. transition. All right, here we go. So first up, we have Alabama. And I already covered this in the first episode, but just a quick review. And I do kind of want to maybe apologize a little bit because I was a little harsh in that first episode about Alabama. I don't hate Alabama. I just hate the unfair treatment that they get in the media. Is really all that. The hatred that I have is not towards Alabama at all. It's for the unfair treatment that they get, and how they can every single year be in the top 4. Like, if we had the playoffs like tomorrow without even them playing a single down of a season, and they're always in the top 4, so they would always be a shoe-in for that spot, which I just find that very annoying. But that is one thing I wanted to clarify that I kind of wanted to address real quick before moving on. But you kind of look at what they did last season, and I just was not really that impressed with them. I mean, don't get me wrong, they had a decent, amount of wins, but they had a lot of games that they could have very well easily lost as well. You see, like, Texas is one of those teams one of those games they could have easily lost. Texas A&M could have easily beat them. And for some reason I didn't highlight that game, but I should have. Ole Miss could have beat them. I mean, Auburn. For some reason, I remember Auburn being a closer game than that, but it may have been one of those where it was a close game for a good chunk of it, but then Alabama might have broke away later on. It may have been one of those kind of games, but once again, I think that Alabama is always overrated, especially at the start of every season. They're always given the benefit of the doubt, and a lot of times people are like, well, they're just really good, and like, but they, even Alabama loses talent. Even Alabama has people that graduate and move on, but people's reasoning for like teams like TCU for being ranked lower are because they lost players or they lost talent. And I know TCU lost a lot of players this year, but you give Alabama a break for losing some of their key players, but then TCU, they're like, oh, forget them. We're gonna rank them lower than other Big 12 teams. It just makes no sense to me. So I just wanted to quickly go over Alabama, though, in that sense, and kind of reiterate some of that. I don't want to dwell too much on it because I already went over Alabama in depth yesterday. So let's kind of move on. So kind of going on with Texas and that sort of thing. Once again, I just don't see how Texas can be justified being the first Big 12 team on the rank, or the one leading the charge in the Big 12 when they had a terrible season. I mean, you look at all of the losses that they had, and also other games that very well could have been losses, and yet they are given the benefit of the doubt. And I kind of scratch my head and think that maybe the reason they put Texas where they put them is because they have to play another team early in the season, and that team just so happens to be Alabama. It gives them a potential quality win and or quality loss. So that it's just at least the media polls, and once again, I know they're not official polls. I know that there is an official playoff committee poll that is what puts these teams into the playoffs. But I do think that these polls do influence that. I do think that the committee does take these polls into consideration, whether they, admit it or not. I do think that is one of the things that they do look at. They see what everybody else is saying about these teams, and then they kind of factor that into their own opinions. But still, I mean, you look at Texas and all those losses against Alabama, against Texas Tech. Granted, that was in overtime, so that one they could have very well easily won that game. But still, another L on their record. They lost to OSU, which is oddly, it's kind of funny because they shut out Oklahoma, but then they lost to OSU. And then Oklahoma beat OSU. So it makes no sense how that whole thing went down. But, also another game that they struggled in was against Iowa State. I mean, Iowa State could have very well easily won that game. And then, of course, you have TCU, who, I mean, they lost to TCU. Yet TCU doesn't deserve to be ahead of them for some reason in the current poll. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then of course Texas lost to Washington. I almost said we. I'm not a Texas fan. They lost to Washington in their bowl game. And so I can't root. Even if I wanted to root for Texas to be among the top 10 or top 15 in this case, I just can't justify it. And here later, you're going to see how I feel about Oklahoma, the team that I do love, the team that I am a fan of. I'm gonna do my own team dirty in terms of how I feel about where they should be at. So it's crazy. Like, if anything, TCU should be number 11. However, I think TCU should be even higher than 11. I think that TCU is being dealt dirty, but we'll get to that later. Next up, we have USC. USC didn't really do anything great. I mean, you look at the strength of schedule for one. They didn't really have the greatest strength of schedule. I mean, do they have some ranked wins here and there? Yeah. But they also have some ranked losses too. I mean, I just don't see a strength of schedule argument in USC's favor. But yeah, we're going to make them number 6 in the nation, according to the AP Top 25. That makes no sense. I mean, you look at some of these games that I have highlighted, even the ones that they won. Oregon State, kind of a nobody team. I hate to say that about certain teams, because I do root for the underdogs, but Oregon State's not really been known to be that great of a football team. And they almost lost to them. Granted, that's early in the season, and I'm sure there were possibly factors involved in that, but still, that because I didn't watch that game, but there might have been other factors that I didn't see. But the fact, just looking at the record, it doesn't look really good from somebody on the outside looking in. You look at Utah, they lost to Utah twice in that season. First time was actually a decent game, but then the second time, Utah kicked it into second gear and blew them out of the water. You have the win against Arizona, but it's kind of close, cutting it really close. You have the win against California, cutting it really close. Both teams not really that great. I honestly am under the impression that without Caleb Williams, USC is nothing. They could prove me wrong this season. It could be next man up kind of situation where if something happens to Caleb Williams, which I don't wish that upon him, but if something does happen, I could be proven wrong. but I just don't see it. And I as a preseason poll, I just don't understand how you can rank USC at number 6. If anything, I think TCU should be number 6. If it just doesn't make any sense to drop TCU, who went to the actual national championship game. Yeah, they got slaughtered, but they at least made it there. I don't even know what bowl game USC went to. Let's see, where did they went to the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. And they lost to Tulane. Tulane beat them in the Cotton Bowl. To me, that's hilarious. Yet we're gonna rank them at number 6. It's so funny. It really is. It's a joke at this point to see this. Both of these polls. And that's why I hate them. That's why I hate these polls. I think that they're dumb. I think that all they're doing is bolstering teams that have no business being bolstered. It gives them those quality wins or quality losses that shouldn't really be a factor because they're placed in those positions unfairly, in my opinion. It just doesn't make sense. But I mean, I don't know. USC, I think, is another overrated team. And then you have Notre Dame. How in the world can you justify putting Notre Dame at 13 when you have 4 losses? And I have a bunch of games highlighted on there. I have a bunch of games highlighted on there of teams that they lost to and squeaked by. Notre Dame, like Alabama, is given the benefit of the doubt. And it's also without a conference. They have no way of becoming a conference champion. Absolutely zero way. Yet we're going to give them the number 13 spot when there are other teams that are more deserving to be there who do have to play another game in a conference title that could possibly make or break them going to the playoffs. But Notre Dame, they don't have to worry about a conference game. They play less games than everybody else, yet somehow miraculously is given the benefit of the doubt. And it's all because of their history. It's all because of their brand name. I mean, there's not much more I can say about Notre Dame. They have to go undefeated. If they don't go undefeated, they're out, as far as I'm concerned. Because they can't play a conference title game. And that, that's in my opinion. And so this is where I'm kind of heading into biased territory here. But I'm trying to be unbiased as possible. If you hadn't noticed, no, I'm just kidding. But seriously though, like, I think that independent teams in college football really are hurting themselves being independent and not being a part of a conference, because how is that fair that a team can win less games and make it to a playoff of 4 teams? when all those other teams that are in the playoffs most likely had to get through a conference game. And in some cases, that conference game is what makes or breaks them making it. It just doesn't make any sense. Then you look at TCU. I've already talked a little bit about TCU. But you look at that record. I mean, their literal only loss last year, if you're not including the playoffs, their only loss was to Kansas State in overtime that could have gone either way. Look at all those W's on that record. That is a great schedule. That's a great record. And then you look at how they played Georgia. Yeah, Georgia just dominated, but the last couple of years, Georgia could beat anybody. They could set the schedule, or they could set the points. Whatever they want the points to end up as is what they can obtain, at least in the last couple of years. That could change this year. Who knows? But the last 2 years, Georgia's been a force to be reckoned with, and so it was kind of no surprise that Georgia just dominated that game. But they even beat Michigan, like, and then Michigan's number 2 on this list. Yet we're gonna put TCU all the way down to 17. I mean, we got 2 Big Ten teams in the top 4 spots. We literally have 3 SEC teams in the top 5 spots. But TCU is all the way at 17, and they made it to the actual national championship game. Makes no sense. I know I keep saying that, but it makes no sense. That's really all I have to say about TCU. Kansas State is kind of a weird one because I mean, they had quite a few losses. But I don't think that they deserve to be 16. They definitely don't deserve to be above TCU. Yeah, they may have beat them in the conference game, but they beat them in overtime. It was one of those games that could have gone either way. When TCU beat Kansas State earlier in the season as well, mind you. But we're going to give Kansas State a spot above a team that actually made it to the national championship game. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If anything, I do think Kansas State deserves to be on this list at the very least, but I don't think that they deserve to be 16. If anything, I would probably put them like 22 to 25, somewhere around in there. They deserve to be there on the list, just not 16 in my opinion. But that's really all I have to say about Kansas State. I mean, and I should have already put up the highlighted stuff, but I mean, it was kind of clear of what you could see with that. So, I mean, it's really it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird situation. But now we're going to get to my favorite team. and I said this earlier that I was kind of dog on my Sooners here. I mean, look at that. That's terrible. It's terrible. I don't see the I cannot justify us being on this list. I don't think we deserve to be in the top 25 starting out the season. I want us to earn it. I would love for a situation where we start the season unranked as far as everybody's polls, and then we sweep through and make it to the playoffs by the end of the season. I would love that. That would be a great Cinderella story or a great comeback story for my Sooners. And quite frankly, I think we deserve to be off of this list. We didn't play well last year. At all. Which was to be expected. They went through a transition year, but they need to prove themselves as far as I'm concerned. They need to come out on fire. They need to come out and do their thing. But until they prove to me that they are ready, I don't want to see them on this list. I don't care if they dominate their first 3 games. I mean, their first 3 games are all non-conference games that are just things that they schedule just for the sake of scheduling a complete season. But we need to get to our first Big 12 game to really gauge where we're at and actually do well in it before I start to have hope in my Sooners again. I don't want to have another situation where we dominate our first 3 games and then we have 3 L's right after that, and one of those L's being a shutout by Texas. That was pretty sad. I know we weren't at full strength in that game, but come on. We couldn't score 1 point on Texas. I laugh about it right now. Obviously, it was frustrating during it, but I'm sorry. I have to dog on my Sooners. They definitely let me down. But at the end of the day, I am Sooner born, I am Sooner bred, and when I die, I am Sooner dead. I will always root for them. And, at the end of the day, all of these teams, not just my Sooners, but all these teams, they're college students. They're pretty young. It's a lot of pressure putting on these kids. I can call them kids because I'm a kid too, so. But I don't know. Sometimes I think as a fan base, we do put a lot of pressure on these kids. So there's really no team that I hate. I sound like I hate Alabama. I sound like I hate Notre Dame and Texas and USC and all these other teams. But I really don't. It's more of the bias in the media that I do not like. I don't wish to put any unnecessary pressure on these kids. I think that they put in a lot of hard work each and every day to get themselves as prepared for each game as they possibly can. So that way people like me can be entertained. And so one day they can get a nice paycheck, I'm sure. But no, the amount of hatred I have towards a lot of, or not hatred, but a lot of the negative emotions that I've kind of demonstrated in the last two streams towards college football as a whole is the media bias. That's where all of this is coming from. And if I had my way, I would do away with preseason polls. I think that they do nothing but harm. And it puts a lot of unfair expectations on teams and players and coaches. I mean, we all, like, as a Sooner fan, to all my Sooner fans out there, as a Sooner fan, we bought into the hype. We thought we were we were the show after Nebraska. Everybody was sold that Oklahoma's back and we were going to be the dominant force. And then Kansas State rolls around. I mean, and there's something about Kansas State. Like, there is something about them that is like the bane of Oklahoma's existence. I do want to say that. It's like, for some reason, that, like, of all the teams to lose to, that is like the numero uno team that we always have to circle on our schedules. And it doesn't matter if it's home or away. It's like, no matter if it's home or away, here lately, we have to circle Kansas State. But all that to say, I love this sport. I'm very passionate about it, as you can tell. A lot of my frustrations are fueled by some of the emotions I have towards some of the things that I dislike about the sport. Mainly the media. But at the end of the day, I am a fan. I'm definitely no expert. I'm the type of fan who focuses more on the team than individual players. Like, it amazes me some of the other people who can sit there and rattle off like a person from a random position and like they could almost like memorize an entire roster. It amazes me, and like I can pick up like a lot of the big time people, but in terms of the like other positions, like I don't really take the time as I probably should to recognize a lot of those other positions. But I do focus a lot on team data and team strengths as opposed to individuals. But I'm going to try to do better at that. I do want to give recognition where it's earned to all the different players who are able to play and play well. I do think we're in for a solid season. I mean, especially the season before many changes occur. I think we're in for a real treat. We're going to see major changes all across the board in the coming years. And I think it will kind of help reset everything. Maybe kind of clean out the dynasties that have been rampant the last several years and sets things up for kind of a reset in college football. That's something that I'm looking forward to, because as somebody who's a fairly new fan, I'm really looking forward to the idea of adopting a team from each conference as my favorite team of that conference, the team, teams that I want to root for throughout the seasons. And I already have like a list started for that. And so like this will be a great time to be able to do that. And I might go over that list at some point, but I do look forward to what we have in store. And of course the college football expansion. Like I don't even remember the official date of when that goes into effect. It's probably 2026 or something like that. I think that was the last I heard. But I do look forward to when that goes live, because I think there are a lot of teams that do get left out of the playoffs that do deserve to have a chance. But I think a lot of great changes are to be had. But anyways, I'm kind of rambling at this point. If you made it this far, I do appreciate you stopping by. I'm kind of getting things going with this sort of thing, and as the season progresses, I plan on doing my own poll that is completely filled out by statistical data rather than biased opinions. So if you're interested in that kind of information and kind of who I will end up crowning as my national champion by the end of the season, definitely stick around for that throughout the season, because I'm going to be posting some updates on what my model that I have established that I showed off in the first stream yesterday. We'll kind of go over some of that information, especially after the first week. I can't wait to actually start to fill in some of the data and actually kind of show that off, so people have a better idea of kind of what that model will look like and how teams will be ranked based off of that data. But yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, we're within 2 weeks away from college football, and it's always an antsy time for me. So I'm definitely chomping at the bits to see how teams do, especially my Sooners. Got to root for them. But anyways, once again, I am rambling and I apologize, but I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. And I look forward to the next one. You all take care. Bye.